Thank you very much. Some good perspectives there. After this press conference, we're going to go over to the D.C. bar and file these complaints against two current lawyers in the Obama administration who also served in the Bush administration. And then we're also going to be mailing to New York by express mail complaints against a third intelligence lawyer. And what's kind of remarkable about this issue is we know so much about the torture, but also know so little. This, for example, is the exhibits that we are filing with these complaints. As you can see, they're about 600 pages long, and there's a lot of documentation about what went on. But just this weekend, the New Yorker magazine published an article that called The Secret History, which describes as one highlight, death by crucifixion. Death by crucifixion. CIA operatives torturing an individual so severely, breaking ribs, held up by both arms, hooded. The person died by crucifixion. We know a lot less than we think we know. And one reason why we are pushing this forward through these complaints is to try to begin the process of applying the rule of law to torture. It is not an easy task because we are in Washington, D.C., where there seems to be a real gridlock in dealing with this issue. The administration has shown its unwillingness to release evidence of war crimes, tens of thousands of pictures and videos that would convince the American public that this was not a few bad apples, but was a program of torture in multiple sites affecting probably thousands of people. We see the Congress, which was briefed 40 times on torture, remaining silent and maybe out of their own fear of their own complicity, unwilling to take action. We see an Attorney General who approved renditions when he was working in the Clinton administration. So we're taking action to try to stop this. Through velvetrevolution.us's efforts, we have filed complaints with the Department of Justice lawyers, DOD lawyers, and White House lawyers. Today we're focusing on CIA lawyers. You can get information about the previous complaints and the current ones at disbartorturelawyers.com. I want to focus especially on two lawyers who are currently in the administration and who were key advocates and facilitators of torture in the Bush-Cheney administration. The first is the acting general counsel of the CIA, John Rizzo. Mr. Rizzo also served as acting general counsel for the Bush-Cheney administration and as senior deputy general counsel for the CIA in that administration as well. And the second lawyer, who is currently a lawyer in the Director of Intelligence's office, Director of National Intelligence Office, Jonathan Feldman. He served as senior counsel, Fredman. He served as senior counsel with the Counterterrorism Center at the CIA in the Bush-Cheney administration. These were two of the harshest and most aggressive advocates for torture of the lawyers involved, and they're still getting a federal government paycheck. I think it's important for us to put some attention on them so that they can be removed from office and then they can be dealt with for the war crimes that they helped to facilitate. The third lawyer that we're sending complaints about was the general counsel in the CIA after Mr. Rizzo, and he served there from October 2003 until 2004, July 2004, and that's Scott Mueller. Let me tell you a little bit about John Rizzo. You may recognize his name because his name was on the memos, the famous Bradbury memos, that were sent that approved torture, and he was the recipient of those memos, so he became known at that point to a lot of people. And the torture described in those memos include everything we've talked about. It included dietary manipulation, it included stress positions, nudity, and waterboarding. And Rizzo was the guy who worked in the CIA to make that happen. This was a very divided agency on this issue. There were people in the agency who opposed it, lawyers on both sides, but Rizzo was the one who pushed that through. And he escalated torture in various ways. First, he was the one who claimed that Abu Zabadiya was not cooperating, when in fact he was. And we've seen now from interrogators involved in the process that in fact he gave more information before being tortured than after. He was also one who pushed for harsher interrogation through waterboarding than the OLC, the Department of Justice, originally allowed. And he was also one who pushed within the CIA for torture despite the division in the agency, despite the opposition of the FBI, and his legal imprimatur, his use of his law license to provide a shield to torturers made this program possible. If he had stood up and said, torture is illegal, the program would have ended there. But instead, he facilitated torture, and for that, he should no longer have a legal license. One other very important highlight from Rizzo's history is in November 2005, the CIA destroyed 93 tapes that showed harsh interrogation, torture techniques. Rizzo was the general counsel at the time. He was in discussions multiple times with the agents involved, and when those tapes were destroyed, there's no question that his approval of that destruction made it possible. As to Jonathan Fredman, he was also an aggressive facilitator of torture in the CIA, and he's famous for saying that torture is subject to perception. If the detainee dies, you're doing it wrong. Well, now we hear about a crucifixion. And in fact, that article reports on several other examples of people dying from torture. The Los Angeles Times had an article recently that describes several others. The Department of Defense, in a report, admitted 32 fatalities. Human Rights Watch has reported 98 fatalities. And they also noted that many people are unaccounted for. So if we're going to investigate any aspect of torture, we should at least investigate the homicides. And in fact, in this crucifixion death, the forensic pathologist described this as a homicide for which no one has yet been even indicted. One thing also that Fredman did is he warned his military counterparts to never videotape aggressive interrogations because they will look ugly. So both these torture lawyers, Rizzo and Fredman, have both hidden evidence. Fredman in advance telling the people involved in torture not to videotape it so that there's no visual video evidence to show what really happened, and Rizzo as general counsel who helped to allow these 92 tapes to be destroyed. Fredman was an early advocate like Rizzo. In October 2002, he pushed for a program that included torture that was carried out directly by CIA officers, also carried out by CIA contractors, as well as by foreign intelligence officials working with the CIA's rendition program. These tortures were operating not only in Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay and Bahram Air Base in Afghanistan, but in black sites around the world. And so they were early advocates of this, and they pushed for it and made it happen. They were both involved, Fredman and Rizzo, both involved in the torturing of Zubaydah, 83 times waterboarded in 1 month. This, by the way, occurred before the Department of Justice put forward its imprimatur, its legal shield, its phony legal shield. So they operated before any kind of legal justification from the Department of Justice in the most aggressive way with waterboarding, which, as we've heard, has been something that the United States has even prosecuted people for, leading up to the death penalty for one person. The final person that we focused on today is Scott Mueller. He's was the general counsel of the CIA. He advanced and defended the policy of torture in all these bases as well. He succeeded Mr. Rizzo in October 2002 and did not change the policy. He left in July 2004, and CIA torture and DOD torture continued throughout that time period that he was in office. Accountability for these lawyers is particularly important because these were the lawyers who made Abu Ghraib possible. And we know that that led to the death of many, many servicemen and women. The outrage that was felt when the truth came out, truth that was really known pretty widely, but when it was visually shown, it created an outrage and created the most powerful recruiting tool for al-Qaeda and people fighting the United States. And so we need to begin to hold the CIA responsibility. This has been a long-term practice of the CIA that's gone on through both political parties, no matter who's in charge. It goes back almost to the founding of the agency. There are CIA manuals that go back to the 1950s. And so if we aren't going to rein in the CIA, we're not going to rein in torture.